Have you ever wondered what it takes to build a love that can weather any storm? A love so deep, so resilient, that it transforms not just two people, but the world around them? In today's story, we'll take you on an emotional journey of passion, vulnerability, and healing. It's the tale of two souls, one haunted by a painful past, the other driven by compassion, who come together to create something extraordinary. This isn't just a story about romance. It's about the power of love to heal, to inspire, and to build a future filled with hope. So, grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's dive into a love story that will touch your heart and remind you of the beauty of true connection. He stood at the edge of his penthouse balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly before him. To the world, he was a man who had it all: power, wealth, and influence. The billionaire CEO of a global luxury hospitality empire, he had built a life most could only dream of. But behind the polished exterior, he carried a secret so heavy it threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. For years he had hidden his pain, burying it beneath the relentless pursuit of success. His empire was his fortress, a place where he could control every detail, every outcome. But no amount of money or power could fill the void that haunted him. And then she entered his life. She was an architect, a visionary who designed spaces that healed and inspired. Her work was celebrated for its ability to transform lives, to create sanctuaries where people could find peace and connection. She was everything he wasn't: open, compassionate, and unafraid to confront the emotions he had spent a lifetime avoiding. Their meeting was unexpected, a collision of two worlds that seemed destined to remain apart. But as their connection deepened, so did the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. She saw through him in a way no one else ever had, and for the first time, he felt the possibility of something more. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and his was no exception. On the night that should have been the happiest of their lives, the truth came out, shattering the fragile bond they had built. This is a story of love, betrayal, and the long road to healing. A story about the power of vulnerability and the courage it takes to face the past. The world knew him as a visionary, a man who had redefined luxury and hospitality. His name was synonymous with opulence, innovation, and success. As the CEO of a global luxury hotel and resort chain, he had built an empire that spanned continents, offering experiences that catered to the elite. From private islands to sky-high penthouses, his brand was a symbol of perfection. But perfection was a mask he wore well. Behind the sharp suits and confident smile was a man who carried a burden no one could see. His life was meticulously curated, every detail controlled to maintain the image of a man who had it all. Yet, in the quiet moments when the world wasn't watching, he felt the weight of his secret pressing down on him. It had started years ago, a trauma he had never fully confronted. It wasn't something he could talk about, not even with those closest to him. Instead, he buried it deep, convincing himself that if he worked hard enough, achieved enough, he could outrun the pain. And for a while, it worked. His empire became his escape, a place where he could channel his energy and avoid the parts of himself he didn't want to face. He was relentless, pushing boundaries and setting new standards in the industry. His name appeared on Forbes covers, his speeches were quoted in business schools, and his hotels were the backdrop for the world's most exclusive events. But success came at a cost. His relationships were fleeting, shallow connections that never lasted. He avoided intimacy, afraid of what it might reveal. People admired him, envied him even, but no one truly knew him. And that was how he preferred it. Still, there were moments when the facade cracked. Late at night, in the silence of his penthouse, he would feel the emptiness creeping in. He had everything he had ever wanted, yet it wasn't enough. There was a void inside him, one that no amount of money or power could fill. He told himself he didn't need anyone, that vulnerability was a weakness he couldn't afford. But deep down, He longed for something more. He just didn't know how to find it, or if he even deserved it. And then, one day, everything changed. She had always believed that spaces could tell stories. To her, architecture wasn't just about buildings or blueprints. It was about creating environments that could transform lives. She was a celebrated architect and urban designer, known for her ability to blend beauty with purpose. Her projects weren't just structures, they were sanctuaries, places where people could find peace, connection, and even healing. Her journey into this field wasn't accidental. Growing up, she had experienced chaos, an unstable home, constant moves, and a lack of places where she felt safe. It was during those turbulent years that she discovered the power of space. A quiet library, a sunlit park, or even a well-designed room could offer her a sense of calm she couldn't find anywhere else. That realization shaped her career. Now she was at the top of her field, designing hospitals, community centers, and wellness retreats that prioritized emotional well-being. Her work was celebrated for its ability to bring people together, to foster healing in ways that went beyond the physical. She believed that architecture could bridge the gap between the mind and the heart, and her designs reflected that philosophy. Her latest project was her most ambitious yet, a luxury wellness retreat designed specifically for trauma survivors. It was a passion project, one that combined her professional expertise with her personal mission to help others find the peace she had once sought. The retreat would be a place of renewal, where people could reconnect with themselves and the world around them. But while her professional life was thriving, her personal life was more complicated. She had always been someone who valued authenticity and trust, but those qualities weren't easy to find. Her work consumed most of her time, and she often found herself surrounded by people who admired her talent but didn't truly understand her. She longed for a connection that went deeper, someone who could see her for who she really was. Still, she wasn't one to dwell on what she didn't have. She poured herself into her work, finding fulfillment in the lives she touched through her designs. She believed that if she could create spaces that healed others, maybe, in some way, she could heal herself too. And then, at a prestigious wellness and design summit, her path crossed with his. It was an unexpected meeting, a collision of two worlds that seemed so different, yet were destined to intertwine. He was there as a keynote speaker, representing his luxury hospitality empire. She was there to present her vision for the wellness retreat. Their first interaction was brief but electric. He was intrigued by her passion and the way she spoke about architecture as if it were alive. She, in turn, was surprised by his thoughtful questions and the depth of his curiosity. Neither of them knew it at the time, but that moment would change everything. The conference hall buzzed with energy, a gathering of some of the brightest minds in wellness, design, and luxury hospitality. It was the kind of event where industry leaders came to showcase their ideas, network, and inspire. For him, it was just another obligation on his packed schedule. He had been invited as a keynote speaker, expected to deliver a polished speech about the future of luxury travel and its role in creating meaningful experiences. For her, it was an opportunity to share her vision. She had been working tirelessly on her latest project, a luxury wellness retreat designed to help trauma survivors reconnect with themselves. It was a deeply personal endeavor, and she was eager to present her ideas to an audience that could help bring them to life. Their paths crossed during her presentation. She stood on the stage, poised and confident, her voice steady as she explained the philosophy behind her designs. She spoke about the importance of creating spaces that didn't just look beautiful, but also felt safe, spaces that could foster healing and connection. Her words were passionate, her ideas groundbreaking. He had planned to leave after his own speech, but something about her presentation caught his attention. He found himself lingering at the back of the room, captivated by the way she spoke. There was a sincerity in her words, a depth that resonated with him in a way he didn't expect. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. She stepped off the stage, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. She had poured so much of herself into this project, and the positive response was overwhelming. He approached her as the crowd began to disperse. "Your presentation was remarkable," he said, his voice calm but genuine. She turned to face him, surprised to see the man who had just delivered the keynote speech standing before her. She recognized him immediately. His face was one of the most recognizable in the business world. "Thank you," she replied, offering a polite smile. "I'm glad you found it interesting." "It was more than interesting," he said, his tone thoughtful. "The way you spoke about architecture as a tool for healing, it's not something I've heard before. It's refreshing." She studied him for a moment, unsure of what to make of his sudden interest. "Well, I believe spaces have the power to shape how we feel, how we connect with ourselves and others. It's not just about aesthetics, it's about creating environments that support emotional well-being." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I'd like to hear more about your project. It sounds like something that could align with what we're trying to do in our resorts, creating experiences that go beyond luxury." The conversation flowed easily from there. They talked about her vision for the retreat, his experiences in the hospitality industry, and the challenges of balancing innovation with authenticity. She was surprised by how engaged he was, how genuinely interested he seemed in her work. For him, the conversation was a revelation. He had attended countless conferences, met hundreds of brilliant people, but there was something different about her. She wasn't trying to impress him or sell him on an idea. She spoke with a quiet confidence, a passion that was both inspiring and disarming. By the end of the evening, they had exchanged contact information, agreeing to continue the conversation. As he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. For the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of curiosity, not about business or success, but about a person. For her, the encounter left her intrigued but cautious. She had spent years building her career, focusing on her work and avoiding distractions. But there was something about him, something she couldn't quite put into words. Neither of them knew it yet, but that meeting was the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. Their connection grew quickly, almost effortlessly. What had started as a professional conversation about her wellness retreat and his luxury resorts soon turned into something deeper. They began meeting regularly, first under the guise of collaboration. He offered to connect her with investors and resources to bring her vision to life, and she, in turn, shared insights that could elevate his hospitality empire. But their conversations often drifted away from work. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, and the challenges they faced in their respective fields. She was fascinated by his ability to think big, to take risks that most people wouldn't dare. He, on the other hand, was drawn to her grounded nature, her ability to see beauty and meaning in the smallest details. Their dates, though neither of them called them that at first, were filled with moments of quiet intimacy. They walked through city parks, discussing the intersection of design and human emotion. They shared late-night dinners in hidden restaurants, where the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them. For her, it was refreshing to meet someone who truly listened, who seemed to value her ideas and respect her independence. For him, it was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, someone who saw through his polished exterior and made him feel like he didn't have to pretend. But, as their relationship deepened, so did the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. He had always been good at compartmentalizing, at keeping his personal struggles hidden from the world. But with her, it wasn't so easy. She had a way of asking questions that made him pause, of looking at him in a way that made him feel exposed. There were moments when he wanted to tell her everything, to open up about the trauma he had carried for so long. But every time he tried, the words caught in his throat. What if she couldn't handle it? What if she saw him differently? Instead, he focused on making her happy. He planned elaborate surprises, like a private tour of an art exhibit she had mentioned loving, or a weekend getaway to a secluded villa he owned. She appreciated the gestures, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding something back. The tension between them began to grow. It wasn't obvious at first, just small moments that felt slightly off. He would pull away when she tried to get too close, both physically and emotionally. He would change the subject when conversations veered into personal territory. She noticed the way his jaw tightened when certain topics came up, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. She tried to be patient, to give him the space he seemed to need. But as much as she cared for him, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he wasn't being completely honest with her. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below, she decided to confront him. "You know," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I've always believed that honesty is the foundation of any relationship. Without it, nothing else really matters." He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "I agree," he said after a moment. "Then why do I feel like there's something you're not telling me?" she asked, her eyes searching his. He hesitated, the weight of her question pressing down on him. He wanted to tell her the truth, to let her in, but the fear of losing her was overwhelming. "It's not that simple," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her heart sinking. "I'm not asking for perfection," she said. "I just want to know the real you, all of you." He reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in a long time," he said. "But there are things about me, things I'm not ready to share yet." She squeezed his hand, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. "I can't force you to open up," she said, "but I need you to know that I'm here whenever you're ready." They sat in silence after that, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. For her, it was a moment of both hope and heartbreak. She wanted to believe that he would eventually let her in, but she couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. For him, it was a reminder of the walls he had built around himself, walls that were now threatening to destroy the one thing he truly cared about. As the days turned into weeks, their relationship continued to blossom, but the tension lingered beneath the surface. She tried to focus on the good, the way he made her laugh, the way he supported her dreams, but the unanswered questions gnawed at her. And for him, the pressure of keeping his secret grew heavier with each passing day. He knew he couldn't keep it from her forever, but the thought of losing her was more than he could bear. Little did they know, the truth would come out sooner than either of them expected, and in a way that would change everything. The weeks leading up to their wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Between finalizing the guest list, coordinating with planners, and juggling their demanding careers, they barely had a moment to breathe. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was an undeniable excitement in the air. For her, the wedding felt like the culmination of everything they had built together. Despite the lingering tension, she believed in their love and the life they were about to start. She had chosen to trust him, to give him the time and space he needed to open up. For him, the wedding was both a dream and a nightmare. He loved her deeply, more than he had ever thought possible, but the weight of his secret loomed over him, growing heavier with each passing day. He had convinced himself that he could keep it hidden, that their love would be enough to overcome the shadows of his past. The ceremony itself was perfect. They exchanged vows in front of a small gathering of family and close friends, the setting as elegant and intimate as their relationship. She wore a simple yet stunning gown, her smile radiant as she walked down the aisle. He stood waiting for her, his heart pounding in his chest, overwhelmed by the sight of her. As they said their vows, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the fresh start he had been searching for. Maybe their love could erase the pain of his past. But deep down, he knew the truth couldn't stay buried forever. The reception was a celebration of their love, filled with laughter, music, and heartfelt toasts. She danced with him under the soft glow of string lights, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. For a moment, it felt like nothing else mattered. But as the night wore on, the reality of what lay ahead began to sink in. When they finally retreated to their suite, the atmosphere shifted. The room was beautifully decorated, with candles casting a warm glow and rose petals scattered across the bed. It was everything she had imagined, a romantic beginning to their new life together. But he felt like he was suffocating. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided her gaze as he poured them each a glass of champagne. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but concerned. He nodded quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, just tired from the day." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said softly. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." Her words were meant to comfort him, but they only made the knot in his chest tighten. He couldn't keep lying to her, not anymore. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" He turned away, unable to meet her eyes. "There's something about me. Something I've been hiding from you." Her mind raced as she tried to process his words. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he set the champagne glass down. "I've been carrying this pain for a long time. It's something I've never been able to talk about, not with anyone." She stepped closer, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. "You can tell me," she said. "Whatever it is, I'm here." He finally turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and vulnerability. "I've struggled with intimacy for years," he admitted, his voice breaking. "It's because of something that happened to me when I was younger, something I've never been able to move past." Her breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. She had sensed there was something he was holding back, but she hadn't expected this. "I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid," he continued, his voice trembling. "Afraid that you'd see me differently, that you'd think I was broken." Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for his hand. "You're not broken," she said firmly. "You're human, and whatever you've been through, it doesn't change how I feel about you." He looked at her, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "I've spent so long trying to bury it, pretending it didn't affect me, but it does. It's affected every relationship I've ever had, and I didn't want it to affect us." She squeezed his hand, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you, but you don't have to face this alone anymore. We'll figure it out together." For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. He had spent so long carrying the weight of his trauma alone, convinced that no one could understand. But here she was, standing by his side, offering him the one thing he had always been too afraid to ask for: acceptance. The rest of the night was quiet, filled with whispered conversations and moments of vulnerability. They didn't rush into anything, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding the trust and intimacy that had been missing. For her, it was a reminder of why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. He wasn't perfect, but he was willing to try, to face his fears and let her in. For him, it was the beginning of a new chapter. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he felt like he didn't have to walk it alone. As they lay together in the quiet of the night, he whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." She smiled, her fingers tracing gentle patterns on his hand. "We're in this together," she said. "Always." And in that moment, they both knew that their love was strong enough to weather whatever storms lay ahead. The days following their wedding were a mix of tenderness and uncertainty. They had taken a step toward honesty, but the path ahead was uncharted territory for both of them. She knew that healing wasn't something that could happen overnight, and he knew that opening up was only the beginning of the work he needed to do. Their honeymoon, which had been planned as a luxurious escape to a private island, became something entirely different. Instead of indulging in the typical romantic activities, They spent their time talking, reflecting, and learning how to navigate this new phase of their relationship. For her, it was a chance to understand him on a deeper level. She asked questions gently, never pushing him beyond what he was ready to share. She listened as he spoke about his past, about the experiences that had shaped him and the pain he had carried for so long. For him, it was both liberating and terrifying. He had spent years avoiding these conversations, burying his trauma under layers of success and control. But with her, he felt safe enough to confront the parts of himself he had always tried to hide. One evening, as they sat on the beach watching the waves crash against the shore, he turned to her and said, "I don't know how to fix this." She reached for his hand, her touch grounding him. "You don't have to fix it alone," she said. "We'll figure it out together. But maybe it's time to talk to someone who can help." He hesitated, the idea of therapy both foreign and daunting. He had always prided himself on his ability to handle things on his own, to push through challenges without asking for help. But he also knew she was right. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. She smiled gently. "The fact that you're willing to try is a start." When they returned from their honeymoon, she helped him find a therapist who specialized in trauma and intimacy issues. It wasn't an easy process. He struggled with the vulnerability of opening up to a stranger, and there were moments when he wanted to give up. But she was there to support him, reminding him that healing was a journey, not a destination. At the same time, she began to educate herself about trauma and its impact on relationships. She read books, attended workshops, and even sought advice from professionals, determined to be the partner he needed. Their relationship began to shift in subtle but significant ways. They started setting aside time each week to talk openly about their feelings, creating a space where honesty and vulnerability were encouraged. He began to share more about his past, and she, in turn, shared her own fears and insecurities. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of frustration when old patterns resurfaced and the weight of his trauma threatened to pull them apart. But they had made a commitment to each other, and they were determined to honor it. One evening, after a particularly emotional therapy session, he came home and found her in the kitchen, preparing dinner. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his head on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said softly. She turned to face him, her eyes filled with warmth. "For what?" "For staying," he said. "For believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "That's what love is," she said. "It's not about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard." As the months went by, they began to rebuild their intimacy, not just physically but emotionally. They learned to communicate in ways they never had before, to trust each other with their fears and vulnerabilities. For her, it was a lesson in patience and compassion. She had always been independent, used to solving problems on her own. But this was different. This required her to let go of control, to trust the process and believe in their ability to grow together. For him, it was a journey of self-discovery. He began to see himself not as broken, but as someone who had survived and was now learning to thrive. He realized that his past didn't define him, and that he was capable of building a future filled with love and connection. One day, as they sat together in their living room, she turned to him and said, "You know, I think we should revisit the idea of the wellness retreat." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You mean your original project?" She nodded. "Yes, but this time we do it together. A place where people can heal just like we're learning to. A space that combines your vision for luxury with my passion for creating environments that nurture the soul." He smiled, the idea sparking something within him. "I like that," he said. "It feels meaningful." And so, they began to work on the project together, pouring their hearts into creating a retreat that reflected their journey. It became more than just a business venture. It was a testament to their resilience, a symbol of the love and trust they had built. As they stood on the site of their future retreat, watching the sun set over the horizon, he turned to her and said, I never thought I'd find this. Not just love, but peace." She took his hand, her eyes shining with emotion. "You deserve it," she said. "We both do." And in that moment they knew that while their journey wasn't over, they had found something worth fighting for, a love that was stronger than their fears, and a future filled with hope. The wellness retreat became more than just a project. It was a shared dream that brought them closer together. They poured their energy, creativity, and passion into every detail, determined to create a space that reflected their journey and the lessons they had learned. For her, it was an opportunity to bring her vision to life. She designed the retreat with intention, focusing on creating spaces that felt safe, calming, and restorative. Every room, every corner, every element was crafted with care, from the soft lighting to the natural materials that blended seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. For him, it was a chance to channel his business acumen into something deeply personal. He handled the logistics, securing funding, managing timelines, and ensuring that the retreat would be a sustainable success. But more than that, he found himself invested in the purpose behind it. A place where people could heal, just as he had begun to. Working together wasn't always easy. They had different approaches, and there were moments of tension when their ideas clashed. But those moments became opportunities for growth, teaching them how to communicate and compromise in ways they hadn't before. One evening, as they sat in their home office reviewing plans, she looked up from her sketches and smiled. "You know, I never imagined we'd be doing this together." He glanced at her, a playful smirk on his face. "What? You didn't think I'd make a good business partner?" She laughed, shaking her head. "No, it's not that. It's just, this feels so much bigger than anything I ever dreamed of, and I couldn't have done it without you." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I couldn't have done it without you either," he said. "This isn't just a retreat. It's a part of us, a reflection of everything we've been through." As the months went by, the retreat began to take shape. They visited the site regularly, watching as their vision came to life. The main building, with its sweeping views and open, airy design, was a testament to her talent. The surrounding gardens, filled with native plants and quiet walking paths, were a nod to his love of creating spaces that felt both luxurious and grounded. But the most meaningful part of the retreat was the Wellness Center, a space dedicated to therapy, meditation, and personal growth. It was his idea, inspired by his own journey. "I want people to have a place where they can feel safe," he had said, "a place where they can start to heal, just like I did." The grand opening of the retreat was a moment of triumph. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered to celebrate their achievement, marveling at the beauty and purpose of the space they had created. During the opening ceremony, she stood on the stage, addressing the crowd with a mix of pride and gratitude. "This retreat is more than just a business," she said. "It's a labor of love, a place where people can find peace, connection, and healing, and it wouldn't have been possible without the support of my incredible husband." The audience erupted in applause as she turned to him, her eyes shining with emotion. He joined her on stage, taking her hand as he spoke. "This retreat is a reflection of our journey," he said. "It's proof that even in the face of pain and fear, love and hope can prevail, and I'm so grateful to have shared this journey with the most amazing partner I could ever ask for." As the applause filled the room, they looked at each other, their connection stronger than ever. In the months that followed, the retreat became a sanctuary for people from all walks of life. Guests came seeking solace, healing, and inspiration, and many left feeling transformed. The stories of those who visited the retreat became a source of pride for both of them, a reminder of why they had embarked on this journey in the first place. But the retreat wasn't just about helping others, it was also a testament to their own growth. Their relationship continued to evolve, built on a foundation of trust, communication, and mutual respect. They learned to navigate the challenges of life together, supporting each other through the highs and lows. For her, it was a lesson in patience and vulnerability. She had always been strong and independent, but she realized that true strength came from allowing herself to lean on him when she needed to. For him, it was a journey of self-acceptance. He had spent so long believing that his past defined him, but he now understood that it was only a part of his story. With her by his side, he felt capable of facing anything. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their home overlooking the retreat, he turned to her and said, "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "All the time," she said. "It's amazing to think about where we started and where we are now." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I used to think I wasn't capable of this, of love, of connection, of building something meaningful, but you showed me that I was wrong." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with warmth. "You were always capable," she said. "You just needed someone to remind you." As they sat together, watching the sun set over the retreat they had built, they felt a sense of peace they had never known before. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Because in the end, they had found something that was stronger than fear, stronger than pain. They had found each other. If you love heartfelt stories about the power of love and connection, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Join us for more inspiring tales that will warm your heart and remind you of the beauty of true love.